Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, yeah. We'll just wait for the other kid to also come. Okay. There's one more student who will join, so we'll just wait for him. The idea is, excuse me. The idea is to do chapter number 12, 13, 14, 15 from Joseph Silverman's book, the book that I've shared on the group, right? So these chapters are about prime numbers and some of the properties of prime numbers. So very interesting. Mersenne primes, perfect numbers, we'll see all of that. Next week onwards, we'll go on to more detailed applications. So, but this week's theory class will be mostly about these 4 chapters. We'll just wait for the other student to also join. Okay. Just hold on for 3-4 minutes. Okay, actually, we'll continue. This class is anyway going to be recorded, so it's fine. Uh, so the first thing that we look at is theorem 12.1, which is a very famous theorem called infinitely many primes. So Euclid proved that there are infinite prime numbers. There are infinitely many primes. So this is the Euclid's proof of prime numbers being infinite. So how do you do that? Prime numbers are infinite. So he proves it by contradiction, very interesting way. He says that let's say we have a list of prime numbers, right? P1, P2, and so on. Let's say there are n numbers on that list, and let's say this is a finite list. If this is a finite list, if we can construct a new number, let's say we construct a new number q, which is equal to the product of each of those numbers plus 1, product of each of those primes plus 1. So obviously this new number will not be divisible by either by any p1, p2, and so on till pn, right? So it is not divisible by any of the prime numbers that were there in my complete list of prime numbers here. So because there is a plus 1 at the end, so the only two numbers that it is divisible by, like only two factors of q are 1 and q. These are the only two factors. So if that is the case, q must be prime. Q must be prime, and q must be prime. That means we have to update that list, right? Q should have been in that list. So obviously there is a contradiction now, because just now you thought that this is the complete list of prime numbers, but clearly q was not present in that list. And you can repeat this process many times, right? You can keep doing this again and again and keep creating new numbers which will be added to any finite list. So the number of prime numbers will be infinite, because if ever there was a finite list of primes, you could create a new number that is the product of all of those finitely many prime numbers and add one to them, and that number itself should be a prime number, which contradicts the fact that it is finite. So that was a classic proof by Euclid. Then we can now basically figure out many different types of prime numbers. So in the book, he says, like, using this logic, you can start with any prime number and figure out that there are so many different possible prime numbers like that. So there is another theorem 12.2 where he proves that there are infinitely many prime numbers. There are infinitely many prime numbers which are 3 modulo 4 prime numbers congruent to 3 modulo 4. 3 modulo 4. Okay. So now this is what? This is saying that there are infinite number of prime numbers which are such that they can be written like 4k plus 3 form. So how do you prove this, right? So again, the same logic we will use. The logic is again Euclid's method of proof. Euclid's method of proving. So let's say you have a finite list. So we will start with an assumption that we have a finite number of such prime numbers congruent to 3 modulo 4. So let's say we have a finite list. We have a finite list of 3 mod 4 primes. 3 mod 4 primes. This is our starting assumption. Our goal will be to make this list longer by finding a new 3 mod 4 prime, right? If we are able to find a new prime which is also 3 mod 4 prime, which is 3 mod 4, then basically we have proved that this list was not complete, right? And this list should have had another member. And if you are able to do that, you can repeat that process again and again with the updated list. So suppose that other member turned out to be q. You can add q to that list. And now my new finite list is some p1, p2, so on, pn and q. And then repeat that process again and generate another r, another prime number. And you can repeat that process infinite number of times, and you will be able to prove that it is impossible to have a finite list of 3 mod 4 primes. Are you understanding what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So suppose that our initial list of 3 mod 4 primes was, the first such prime number is obviously 3. And let's say the next prime numbers I'm just writing as P1, P2, so on, till PR. Okay. This is my initial list. And I'm saying that this is the complete list of 3 mod 4 primes. And there are no such 3 mod 4 primes basically remaining, right? Now, you have to imaginatively construct a new number which will also be prime and which will also be 3 mod 4, right? If you are able to do that, then you are able to prove that this list was not complete and hence our assumption was wrong, and you could repeat that process again and get an infinite number of such primes, right? Okay, so what number should we consider that will make it a 4k plus 3 sort of a prime number, right? So one nice way to do that is consider the number n is equal to 4 times p1, p2, so on, pr plus 3. Think about this number. First of all, is it a prime? Is it a prime, right? It is it is definitely not divisible by any of the prime numbers p1, p2 till pr, right? Correct. It is not divisible by any of those prime numbers, right? So it is also not divisible by 4 because it is 4k plus 3, right? So it is basically odd. You're ensuring that it is odd by adding something which is even plus odd, right? So it is not divisible by 2 and it is not divisible by any of the primes in this list, right? Why is it not divisible by 3? It is not divisible by 3 because p1, p2 are itself, all of them are prime numbers, and 4 is not divisible by 3, right? So correct. So what we have is, we know that this number n, right? This number n must be a product of some prime numbers, right? This is a normal natural number, right? So it has to be written as product of some primes, q1, q2, so on, qs, right? At the same time, it is also 4 times p1, p2 till pr plus 3, right? Correct. Are you understanding that there are two alternate ways in which we can write n? Why is it written like this? Because this is our choice. This is how we chose to write it, right? This is how we constructed the natural number n, right? This must be true because there must be some prime factorization for this natural number, right? It might not involve these prime numbers, but it must involve some prime numbers, right? The theorem is saying that there are, what we want to prove is there are infinitely many 4k plus 3 type of prime numbers. Infinitely many 4k plus 3 type of prime numbers. But the theorem doesn't say that there are no prime numbers of other types, right? Obviously, there will be other prime numbers which are not 4k plus 3, right? What we have to just prove is that this type of prime number is not finite, right? So now what I'm going to claim is that among the prime numbers q1 to qs, among the primes q1, q2 to qs, there is one of them which is congruent to 3 modulo 4. One of them congruent to 3 modulo 4. Now, why does that have to be true, right? Why does that have to be true? Because if not, right? If not, these prime numbers, if any one of them is not 4k plus 3, then it must be all of them. If not, then all of them must be of the form 4k plus 1, right? 1 mod 4, basically all of them then must be 1 mod 4, no? Prime numbers cannot be 2 mod 4. Everyone understands that, right?
Yeah.
So it cannot be 2 mod 4. It cannot all be the 1 mod 4 also, because if all of them are 1 mod 4, then the product is also 1 mod 4, but here the product is 3 mod 4, no? You understand this number that we had constructed, right? This number is already a 3 mod 4 number, so you cannot have every prime factor here, every prime number inside being 1 mod 4, right? It's very straightforward actually. So are you guys getting the sense of it? Suppose everyone was 1 mod 4, no? So if you multiply several numbers which are 4p1 plus 1, 4p2 plus 1, and so on, right? What you will get is eventually it will always be 4 times something plus 1, right? The product has to be 4 times something plus 1 if all the factors were 4p plus 1. You can take two factors and check that that is true. There is a +1 at the end when you multiply these two. Everything else is divisible by 4, right? Are you guys getting what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, by constructing a number like this, we are being able to prove that whatever is the prime factorization of n, it has to be different q1, q2, qs from p1, p2, pr, because we know that n is not divisible by p1, p2, pr, right? Therefore, these q's are different numbers. And if the q's are different numbers, right, then we have just now proved that if they have to be equal to congruent to 3 mod 4, one of them must be congruent to 3 mod 4. Therefore, let's say that one is q5. q5 was the prime number which was congruent to 3 mod 4. Then we realize now suddenly that our list of prime numbers, the list of prime numbers which were p1, p2, and so on till pr, which were 3 mod 4 prime numbers, was incomplete, and we had to include q5 into that, right? We should have included q5 into that list. And if you include q5 into that list, what it means is that the list has grown in size by 1, right? Now you can repeat the process again. You can repeat the process again. Now my new list of prime numbers was p1, p2 till pr and q5, right? This is my new list of prime numbers which are 3 mod 4. And now I can construct another number called 4p1, p2, pr into q5 plus 3 is my new number m. And you can say that m will have some prime factorization. Let's say t1, t2, t, tq, whatever. And one of them must be 3 mod 4. Because if all of them are 1 mod 4, m is 1 mod 4, but that is wrong. M is actually 3 mod 4, right? So if one of them is 3 mod 4, then you have to include T1 also into this list, right? T1 is added in the list now. So what you can see is that you can keep doing this process again and again, and the number of prime numbers which are 4k plus 3 types is definitely increasing forever, right? So this is an infinite, so our assumption is wrong. Our assumption was that there are only finitely many 3 mod 4 prime numbers. But this proves that there are infinitely many 3 mod 4 prime numbers. Are you understanding? I hope everyone is getting that. So that is the understanding of this theorem 12.2. Nothing else is required for this. Okay. Then you should go through, by the way, Hitat, we are doing this. I have sent a book on the group, right? Chapter 12, chapter 13, chapter 14, and 15. These chapters are what I want to cover in today's class. This is from the Silverman book, A Friendly Introduction to Number Theory. Okay. So
Okay.
you should look through that book. It's very nice because it has small chapters and it's very clearly written. So you'll be able to follow it. Okay. So go through that. Then there is a theorem by Dirichlet that he mentions, theorem 12.3, which we will not do the proof of because the proof involves calculus and complex variables. So what the theorem, however, is quite important, the statement of the theorem. Dirichlet's theorem on primes in AP, primes in arithmetic progression. Okay, so he's saying let A and M be integers such that GCD AM is 1. Integers such that GCD of A and M, they are co-prime to each other, is equal to 1. Then there are infinitely many primes that are congruent to that are congruent to A modulo M, A mod M. That is, basically he's saying there are infinite number of prime numbers which satisfy this equation. Now, this tells us that it doesn't even matter that A was 3 and M was 4, right? That was just a special case of Dirichlet's theorem. What we proved just now, right? That there are infinite prime numbers which satisfy this. Notice that 3 and 4 GCD is 1, right? Correct. So therefore, by Dirichlet's theorem, you will be able to say that there are infinite prime numbers which look like 6k plus 5, for example, right? Or 4 mod 7, right? Are you understanding? 10 mod 11, right? All of these theorems are proved if Dirichlet's theorem is true. Is everyone getting what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, you can create many different sequences of prime numbers which are infinite in nature. There are infinitely many prime numbers which are like this. As long as your A and M are co-prime to each other, there will be infinite numbers of P which satisfy this. The proof is beyond our level right now, but knowing this is important because sometimes in questions you might have a situation where you have to think about whether you have infinite number of primes which satisfy certain relations or not, and this just tells you that there are always, you will be able to find 10 mod 11, there should be infinite number of prime numbers which satisfy that. So you can definitely find some prime number which satisfies it, right? 11k plus 10 will have some prime number there, right? Obviously k is equal to 3 satisfy, 43 is prime, right? K is equal to 3 is the first one after uh, first one that satisfies. So this is interesting. What you should do is go through the exercises that are there in chapter 12. Just go through the questions. They're not a lot, 5-6 questions only. We can discuss the solutions in a later class. However, what I will do, I want to cover a little bit of theory. So I'll move on to chapter 13, if this part is clear. You should realize that the previous theorem that we proved was a subset or was a special case of Dirichlet's theorem, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll go ahead. 1 second. Correct. Then chapter 13 is about counting primes. Counting primes, what do we mean? So obviously prime numbers are infinite, but then what does it mean to count them, right? Counting means basically up to a certain number, up to n, how many primes are there? This question. Correct? So obviously that is something that is very interesting and not at all easy, right? So for example, up to any particular number, right? So there is a Greek function that is sometimes there is a function that is defined to be this. So basically you can create a counting function for prime number. Counting function for primes basically is defined like this. Let's say we call pi of x, where this means that number of primes p such that p is less than equal to x, right? So this is a pi of x, which is a counting function that has been defined. Now, obviously, if I ask you pi of 12 is how much? Tell me pi of 12. 2, 3,
5,
5, 7, 11, right?
yeah.
So pi of, this is the set of prime numbers which are less than equal to 12. So the answer of pi of 12 is 5, right? Now, in the book, he gives you a nice table and it is instructive to look at the sequence of values of pi of x. So obviously people have done a lot of calculations. This is the table that the book shows you, pi of x by x. So if you give x as 10, pi of x is 4. Okay. If you give x as 25, pi of x is 9, and so on. 50, pi of x is 15. 100, it is 25. 200, it is 46. 500, it is 95, right? And then there's some other values also that are there in the book, but this is enough. So he has counted all the primes from 10 till 10, then till 25, then till 50, and so on. And he's finding out the ratio here. This ratio is actually 0.400. This ratio is 0.360. Then the ratio keeps diminishing a little bit. 0.3, then 0.25, then 0.23, then 0.168, and so on. This ratio is diminishing. However, the ratio doesn't become 0. Okay. What we know for certain is that pi x by x is getting smaller. Smaller as x increases. Correct? So what does this mean really? This means that for larger numbers, the number of primes is far smaller than the number of numbers, right?
Yeah. The
Because
frequency is
the
reduced.
ratio of number of primes to the overall number of numbers is reducing, right? So as you go further ahead in the number line, what you will realize is that primes are few and far between, right? In the beginning, they are very frequent, right? But as
Yeah.
you go away, or larger numbers as you start to look, primes are much rarer. That is obvious. The reason for that is obvious because if you go for larger numbers, you must check for factorization from a very large number of prime numbers. No? Like as you go higher and higher, the number of prime numbers where the given number should not be divisible by that, right? That number is becoming bigger as well, right? So when you are looking at numbers only till 10, you only have to check with prime numbers from 2, 5, 7, right? 2, 3, 5, 7. You don't have to check for the other numbers. But when you go to n is equal to 10,000, to find prime numbers, you'll have to check also more, right? You understand? So
Yeah.
what we can say here is a simple statement that most numbers are not primes. Most numbers are not primes because the ratio keeps diminishing. Correct. So there is prime number theorem which was proved in the late 1800s. Prime number theorem. This is very important because it gives us an estimate of how many prime numbers are there up to a certain number, right? So the theorem says when x is large, the number of primes less than x, primes less than x is approximately equal to x by ln x. Okay, so what he's saying is limit as x tends to infinity, pi of x by x, pi of x, or simply pi of x is equal to x by ln x. You understand what this means? So for large numbers, if you calculate x by ln of x, ln is natural log. For
Yeah.
large numbers, if you calculate x by ln x, that will be equal to the number of primes below x, or that will be approximately equal. correct? So that is what we are saying when we write that limit statement. Limit x tends to infinity, pi of x becomes equal to x by ln x, right? Again, the proof of this is not something that we can discuss. It is a much more complicated proof here. So just know that this prime number theorem gives you an estimate. So you can actually calculate, let's say x is 100, right? So 100 by ln 100, correct, is my estimate, right? So this is basically 100 by 2 ln 10, right? We have 50 by ln 10, correct? Correct, no? So this is ln 10. So what is the power of 2.7, which will what is the power, basically value of ln 10 you need? So it is basically 50 by 2.303, no? 2.303 will change the base to log 10, right? You understand? I think this should be this. So when you divide this, if you had divided by 2 only, it would have been 25. Right now you're dividing by 2.303, so it is slightly lesser than 50, slightly lesser than 25, right? No, actually my answer right now is coming what? Uh, 50 by 2.3303 is coming out to be less than 25, right? And I have something here which is actual number of primes is 25.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is not accurate because he says that x has to be large for it to become more accurate. Okay. So if you would have taken 500, for example, right? So 500 by ln 500, right? So that will be ln 100 plus ln 5. So that will be 2 ln 10 plus ln 5 is ln 10 by 2. So ln 10 minus ln 2. So that doesn't matter. So this will become 3 ln 10. So 50 by 3 into 2.303 minus ln 2. Correct. So this becomes 50, though this is 500 on top. 500 by 6.9, right? Almost 500 by 7, right? Correct. So that comes out to be 71 or something, right? Obviously, this is a very rough estimate. This is a very rough estimate because we have not done minus ln2. No, actually, we should have done minus ln2.
Yeah, because on the net it's coming 80 something.
If you do minus ln2 and all, then you will get something better, right? If you just do that, right? So 0.693 this is, no? 0.693 this is. So you get 6.9 minus 0.69. So minus 6.9 minus 0.7. So you divide 500 by 6.2 now, actually, right? So this becomes 250 by 3.1, right? So it is around 83 or something, right?
Yeah.
Which is not exactly 95, but close enough because right now my numbers are very small, right? X is only 500. If you had bigger numbers, you will see that it approaches this x by ln x value, the number of prime numbers. Okay. So this theory is correct. It's just that we can only like really see its magic when you go for a very large number of x. By the way, if you had to find all primes, find all primes less than 10,000, right? What would you do? Or 100,000, right? How would you do that? If suppose you were given a question like this, find all primes less than 100,000. Put one more zero actually. What is an approach that you would take? The best way to do these things is by computer programs, okay?
Yeah.
Write a program to find all primes less than 1 million or whatever, right? This is 10
Yeah.
power 6. So what you will do is create a loop and run through all numbers from 1 to 10 power 6, right? And each time you get one number, this is a loop through 1 to 10 power 6, right? Each time you
Yeah.
get one number, you will check whether it is divisible by 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, right? You can create a list of prime numbers till 1000, right? You have to check till root n, because after that, if any prime number is bigger than root n, then if you multiply it with itself, you are getting a number greater than 10 million, greater than this number, right?
Yeah.
So you can check only till root n and create a list of prime numbers and check each number with that, right? And then if it is not divisible by any of these prime factors, then it will be a prime number. Correct? Technically, you are supposed to check for prime numbers till n, right? Till this number. But like very quickly, you can eliminate many of them, right? So the best way to find all of this information is actually computer programs. That is how people do it. Okay, so you need to be aware that you cannot on your own by hand and all, you cannot do all this, right?
Yeah.
People run programs where the algorithms that are running in those programs are the theory that you need for maths, right? So the theory is, you know the theory, then you create the appropriate program, right? Then we look at some unproven conjectures that have not yet been proven but are quite important and historically very important because many people have tried to get them. So first one is Goldbach's conjecture. Goldbach's conjecture. Does anybody know what this is? Have you heard of this?
Yeah. Like something greater than 4 is a sum of two primes or something.
Every even number
Yeah.
greater than 4 is a sum of two primes. So you can quickly see that it works out for small numbers, okay? So 4 is equal to 2 plus 2, right? 6 is equal to 3 plus 3, correct? 8 is equal to 3 plus 5. Every even number greater. So 10 is equal to 7 plus 3. 12 is equal to 7 plus 5, right? Every even number you can do it. So 14 is equal to, you can say 11 plus 3, right? So people have actually verified this up to all even numbers till 2 into 10 power 10 actually. Very high numbers they have checked and it has always been correct, but obviously still now it is unsolved. So people have not been able to prove this statement. Okay. The closest that people came was in 1937, a Russian mathematician Vinogradov. What he proved was that every odd number n is a sum of 3 primes. Okay. And another mathematician in 1966 proved that every even number n is a sum of two numbers p plus a, where p is prime and a is either prime or a product of two primes or a product of two primes. So it is almost done, but still it has not been solved. So this is almost the prime number Goldbach's conjecture. Right? He has split it as two numbers p plus a, and he's able to prove that it is always either p plus a, where p is prime and A is a product of two primes or maybe a prime. Correct? So you realize that this is a proven fact. What is this? Is a proof. So that means mathematically people have been able to show that either you add two primes or you add a prime number and another number which is a product of two primes, and you will end up getting an even number. And for every even number, this can be shown. It's just that the tougher statement to show would be, don't put this either or, right? The first statement would be to prove that remove this, right? It can always be written as a sum of two primes, which is Goldbach's conjecture. So it has not yet been settled. So this is still a question that is open. Then the next one is the twin primes conjecture. Twin primes conjecture. What this one says is that there are infinitely many primes such that there are infinitely many primes P primes P such that P plus 2 is also a prime. Now, this is very common. You'll see this a lot. You can find pairs of numbers which are different by 2 and they are also prime. For example, you can easily say 11 and 13, 5 and 7, right? 3 and 5, correct? You can find such pairs all the time, 101 and 103, correct? You will see 41 and 43. Are you understanding what this twin prime conjecture is saying? There are infinite number of such pairs. Again, this is also something that has not been done yet. What has been done, however, is that people have found these two twin primes. Okay, I'm just writing this twin primes. 0, 6, 6083 multiplied by 2 power 38880 minus 1 and 242206083 multiplied by 2 power 38880 plus 1. So imagine people have been able to verify that both of these are prime numbers. Both of these are prime numbers. That is just like, this number is not even something that you can process using, like you cannot get a sense of this number. You cannot even store it in a computer. It is so big.
Yeah.
Okay, so because the number of bits and all on the computer available, no? Like, probably on a supercomputer also it will be impossible to store also this number, because this is amazingly large, right? So people have, however, been able to prove that this is prime, this is prime. So this is the largest twin prime pair, largest pair of twin primes that people have found so far. Okay. Again, this is also unsolved. And the same scientist, a Chinese scientist, Chen Jing-run, the same scientist who proved the other one, the Goldbach conjecture P plus A, right? He has proved it that any even number can be written as P plus A, where A is either a prime or product of two primes. P or product of two primes. The same guy has also proved, he has gotten close to this twin prime conjecture also, and he has also proved that there are infinitely many primes, P such that P plus 2 is, again, same thing, either a prime or a product of two primes, or a product of two primes. So almost similar steps people have reached. Like this is the same logic, like this and this are either a prime or a pair of product of two primes. So this OR statement is what we are stuck at. And the same for the Goldbach conjecture also, same for the twin prime conjecture also. So if someone is able to remove this in the proof, then we will be solving that conjecture. Correct. So last one that we look at is the n square plus 1 conjecture. N square plus 1 conjecture. These are called conjectures because we don't know the truth of these statements. We don't have a mathematical proof. We have a very good idea. It feels like it's right, these statements, but we don't have a proof for it. Okay. So this conjecture says that there are infinitely many primes of the form n square plus 1. Many primes of the form n square plus 1. Now, obviously, like if n is odd, then n square plus 1 is even, right? So it cannot be a prime, right?
Cannot be, yeah.
Cannot be prime because it will become even, right? So 2 will be a factor, right? So this will only work for n
Even.
is even, right? It should only work for n is even. And you can see it is working many times. 2 square plus 1 is 5, right? 4 square plus 1 is 17. These are primes, right? 6 square plus 1 is 37. 8 square plus 1, however, doesn't work, okay?
Yeah.
10 square plus 1 works, 101, right? 14 square plus 1 works, 197. 16 square also works, 257 is also a prime. 18 square plus 1 doesn't work because it becomes 325, right? 20 square plus 1 works, 401, it's a prime. So basically, there are many cases where it seems to work, but we are not able to prove that there are infinitely many prime numbers like this. Correct? So these are 3 statements, 3 interesting properties. Now we go ahead, we'll look at one special type of prime numbers which are called Mersenne primes. Chapter 14 is about Mersenne primes. Named after a guy called Mersenne, Italian guy. What this says is, if you look at the table of values of a power n minus 1, right? So let's see, let's construct a table. If suppose basically these are primes that are of the form a power n minus 1, okay, with n greater than equal to 2, prime numbers like this. So example of a prime number like this would be 31, because 31 is 2 power 5 minus 1, right? Correct. You can also see when, basically think about when can this happen, when can this be a prime number. A can be any number. So think about it, is a is odd, suppose, right? Then obviously a power 5 minus 1 is even, no?
Yeah.
Then not a prime. Correct. So obviously a must be even. First condition is a must be even, right? Correct. So even then, when you have even numbers also, it's not always going to work, right? There are many cases where you don't get anything. So let's take some examples. 2 square minus 1, 3 square minus 1, 4 square minus 1, 5 square minus 1, and so on. This is 3, this is 8, right? So anyway, odd numbers you should eliminate. 4 square minus 1 is 15, however, right? 4 square minus 1 doesn't seem to work. 6 square minus 1 is 35, not working, right? 8 square minus 1, 8 square minus 1 is again 63, not working. So many times it is not working, right? But once it worked in 2 square minus 1, correct? You understand? Let's look at third powers. Let's say 2 cube minus 1, 3 cube minus 1, 4 cube minus 1, and so on. 5 cube minus 1, 6 cube minus 1. So here it is 7, it is working. 3 cube minus 1 is 26, doesn't work. This is equal to 60. 4 into 4 into 4 is 64, minus 1, 63, again doesn't work. 5 cube minus 1 doesn't work because obviously, okay, anyway, we didn't have to check 3 and 5. We only have to check odd A's, right? So 6 cube minus 1 will be 215, won't work. Correct. So again, every time you're getting one answer, you're getting in this, right? So we can see that a power n minus 1 is divisible by a minus 1. Why? Because here, think of what in this table we are getting, right? So
Yeah, 1.
this is 1, right? This is a was 2 here, and here a was 3, right? So it is divisible by 2, right? And here a was 4, right? So this is divisible by 3, no? Correct? This is divisible by 5. Are you seeing the pattern? Obviously, a power n minus 1 is divisible by a minus 1. Why is that obvious? Because you have an expansion like this. A power n minus 1 is equal to a minus 1 multiplied by a power n minus 1 plus a power n minus 2 plus so on till a square plus a plus 1. So this is a algebraic identity. Okay? You can actually just multiply it out and confirm it. I hope you guys know about this.
Yeah.
So basically a power n minus 1, if a is an integer and all, then obviously this is also an integer, no? Correct? If a is an integer, you have this is also an integer, right? So clearly a power n minus 1 will be divisible by a minus 1, right? Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So one way to ensure that it is a prime is to make a minus 1 as 1, right? See, then if you have this statement, right, then a power n minus 1 can never be prime except when a minus 1 is 1, no?
Yeah.
Correct? A minus 1 must be equal to 1. Then only you will have this as a prime number, right? I mean,
Yeah.
then you have a chance of it being a prime number, right? At least it should not be divisible by 2, right? Makes sense.
Yeah.
So a minus 1 is 1. That means a must be 2. Correct? You have 2 power n minus 1, right? That is your type of number that we are looking at. Correct? So
Yeah.
basically the whole idea discussion so far can be summarized like this. If a power n minus 1 is prime, right? Then for some numbers, a is greater than equal to 2 and n is greater than equal to 2, right? Then a must be equal to 2 and n must be a prime. must be a prime. Now, why is that so? So we just now saw when a is equal to 2, a minus 1 will be 1, right? Correct. A power n minus 1, you can factorize as this. Correct. This is the factorization, no? Is everyone understanding?
Yeah.
So if a must be equal to 2, this factor becomes 1, right? And if a is equal to 2, what is happening to this factor? This factor is 2 power n minus 2 plus 2 power n minus 1 plus so on plus 2 plus 1, right? And this is the sum of a GP formula. The GP
Yeah.
has first term 1, second term 2. So common ratio is 2. So 2 power, how many terms are there? N terms are there. 0 to n, no, n minus 1 terms are there, right?
Yeah.
This must be n minus, wait, what? 2 power n minus 2, n minus 1. Okay. This seems wrong, no? It should be a power n minus 1 here, right? Correct. Then only you'll get a power n degree, no?
Yeah.
So this is n minus 1. So there are actually 1 to 2 power n minus 1. So that is simply number of terms here is 2 power n. So 2 power n minus 1 by 2 minus 1 multiplied by 1, right? So that is your 2 power n minus 1 is your sum of all of these numbers, right? Correct. So now notice that if a is equal to 1, a is equal to 2, and this is equal to 2 power n minus 1, then that is this side, right?
Yeah.
So you are getting the only two factors are this and this, right? No other prime number can be dividing it now. So this number overall becomes a prime number, right? Because the only way it can be written as factors is this,
Yeah.
correct? Okay. So such prime numbers where you have 2 power p minus 1, 2 power p minus 1, where p is a prime. Such prime numbers are called Mersenne primes. Mersenne primes. So the first few of them are 2 power 2 minus 1 is equal to 3, 2 power 3 minus 1 is equal to 7. So the top part, the exponent of n, must be a prime number. You have 2 power 5 minus 1 is equal to 31. And similarly, 2 power 7 minus 1 is 127. Are you understanding? 2 power 13 minus 1 is 8191. These are all primes that are satisfying this Mersenne condition, right? Now, people have again checked very large numbers for being Mersenne primes. The largest known one has millions of digits. The largest known Mersenne prime. Okay, so again, this is just information that you need to know if you want to go ahead and do, say, chapter number 15, because chapter number 15 will use the knowledge of what is the meaning of Mersenne primes. So chapter 15 is actually more important than this one. This is just a statement where you are learning about a new named kind of a number, right? It has a name, it's called Mersenne prime. It is of the form 2 power p minus 1, where p is a prime, right? Now, what we will look at now is perfect numbers. This is chapter 15, and this is the exploring the connection between Mersenne primes and perfect numbers. So perfect number you would have seen in school or heard about it at least.
Yeah.
Perfect number is such a number which is equal to the sum of all its proper divisors. sum of all the proper divisors is equal to itself, right? Sum of all the proper divisors. What are proper divisors? Divisors excluding the number itself, right? So basically numbers like 6, 28, 42, I think. 42, I think is perfect. Let's see. 6 factors are 1, 2, and 3. And don't write the 6 factor, which is not included in the definition. 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 6. Here the factors are 1, 2, 4, 7, 14, right? Correct. And nothing else. Now notice that the sum of all of these proper factors or proper divisors is equal to 28, right? Correct. Is everyone understanding?
Yeah.
Then the first thing that we will see here is Euclid's theorem. This is theorem 15.1. It says if 2 power p minus 1 is a prime number, if it was a prime number, it would have been a Mersenne prime, right? Because p is always the symbol for prime number. So 2 power p minus 1 means if that is a prime number, if the overall thing is a prime number, it's called a Mersenne prime. And then we can show that 2 power p minus 1 multiplied by 2 power p minus 1 is a perfect number. So basically what Euclid did, this was proven by Euclid again. So what he did, he said that if you want to construct perfect numbers or find some perfect numbers, then select a Mersenne prime, right? Select any Mersenne prime, and what you have to do is, let's say that one was 2 power p minus 1. So your new perfect number will be multiply that 2 power p minus 1 into the 2 power p minus 1, where p was the prime factor coefficient in the factorization of the original number, right? P is the prime factor coefficient here, right? So this is very weird. Like, how is this happening, right? So let's check whether it makes sense. So what are the first two Mersenne primes? Mersenne primes are 2 power, let's say 2 minus 1 is equal to 3. You also have 2 power 3 minus 1 is equal to 7, right? So if you apply it to this Mersenne prime, then you should have 2 power 2 minus 1 multiplied by 2 power 2 minus 1. So that is simply equal to 2 into 3, which is 6, right? It's a perfect number. Here, what would I do? I would do 2 power 2 multiplied by 2 power 3 minus 1. So this is 4 into 7 is equal to 28. Correct. So what we will see is that repeatedly this statement is coming true, right? Whenever you have a Mersenne prime, you can construct a perfect number from it. Construct a perfect number from here. That is why that chapter was done before, right? The proof of this is not at all difficult. The proof of this theorem is not at all difficult. You want to prove that this is a perfect number, right? Given that this is a prime number. Correct. So all you have to do is find all the divisors of this. Find all proper divisors of this. Find all proper divisors and add them. Once you add them, you will get back the number itself. You'll get answer should be 2 power p minus 1 into 2 power p minus 1, right? Once you find all the proper divisors for this and add them, you should get this answer. Do you understand? So that is the proof of this perfect number statement. So the assumption here is only that this original number that you started off with was a prime number. That was the assumption in your statement. If the original number was prime, then you can construct a new perfect number. So I will not do the proof. It is there in the book. You can read it. It's not at all hard. Construct divisors. Okay. So think about how you would get divisors of these. Assume that this is a prime number, right? This is prime. If this is prime, then you cannot have too many divisors here. You can have divisors here and multiples of these primes, right, as divisors. So I can say, I can give you a hint that proper divisors of this would be either 1, 2, 4, so on till 2 power p minus 1. It could also be, let's call this as a prime number q. It could also be divisors like q, 2q, 4q, right? And so on till 2 power p minus 2 into q, right? Because if you multiply 2 power p minus 1 into q, that will become the number itself, right? So you have to only go up till 2 power p minus 2 into q and then add up all of these. You'll be able to prove that that is equal to, the addition of both of this is equal to 2 power p minus 1 into q. So I will just leave that to you. It is there in the book. You will understand if you read through it, right? So what this says is, the theorem 15.1 we have said, we are able to construct new perfect numbers, right? Using Mersenne primes. Then so Euler in the 1800s showed that the Euclid formula that we have, right? Euclid formula, which was basically construct a perfect number like this, 2 power p minus 1 into 2 power p minus 1. Euclid formula gives all the even perfect numbers. All the even perfect numbers will be present. So right now we don't know about odd perfect numbers, but all the even perfect numbers will definitely be able to be captured by this formula. Here, the only thing that we are assuming is that 2 power p minus 1 is a prime. Okay, so the rest of the chapter is about proving this Euler theorem, proving that Euler theorem that given that you have perfect numbers definition, you know about what perfect numbers are, all of the even perfect numbers will have this look. They will look like this. So P is a prime here. So the proof of that involves a concept. It is called the sigma function. Sigma function basically stands for, just like we had defined the phi functions, Euler's phi function, Euler also introduced the sigma function. Sigma function, or written like sigma of n, is equal to sum of all divisors of n, including 1 and n. Sum of all divisors of n, including 1 and n, right? So now, so technically a number is a perfect number, if and only if sigma of n is equal to 2n. Tell me if you both are understanding this.
Yeah.
Right? A number can be perfect only if sigma of n is equal to 2n, no? Because perfect number means all the proper divisors should add to n. And here in sigma, you are including n also, right? So sigma of n will be n plus n, or 2n, right?
Yeah.
So basically, Euler will prove that all even numbers which are perfect, all even perfect numbers. So n is even and it is perfect number. Then sigma of n is equal to 2n, and they will always look like this. So We will get to the proof probably in the next class, but right now what we'll see is how to get the values of sigma n, right? So let's take a few examples. So what is sigma 6, for example? Sigma 6 is what? 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 6, right? So it is 12 because 6 is a perfect number. But if you see sigma of 8, it will come out to be 15. Sigma of 8 is less than 2n, right? Less than 2n. Because 2n was 16, no? And sigma of, for example, if you take 18, it will come out to be 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 6 plus 9 plus 18, which is equal to actually 39. And see that it is greater than 2n, which is 36, right? Correct.
Yeah.
So sometimes you are saying that some numbers, the sigma value is getting lesser than 2n, and for some numbers it is becoming more than 2n, right? So the sigma values are fluctuating, and when it is equal to 2n, then you will call it a perfect number. Now, what about if someone asks you sigma of p power k, right? P is prime. So basically this will be 1 plus p square and all, right? Till p power k, correct? These are all the factors, no? Including 1 and p power k, right?
Yeah.
The answer here is p power k plus 1 minus 1 by p minus 1, right? This is the sum of a GP. You should know GP formula.
Yeah.
There are k plus 1 terms here, okay? What you should also try and do, so this is a formula. So whenever you have prime number to the power k, sigma value is coming out to be this, right? Correct. Now there is also a result that if GCD of m and n is 1, basically if m and n are co-prime, then sigma of mn will be equal to sigma of m into sigma of n. This is also a well-known result. Now think about it. This will help you do a lot of things. This will help you calculate sigma for so many numbers, right? Because again, we'll come just like the phi function, remember? Earlier we had seen the phi function, right?
Yeah.
Phi function was the number of divisors less than n, right? And sigma function is sum of the divisors till n, correct? And there also we had phi of mn was equal to phi of m into phi of n. So now actually if you have this result, what you will be able to do is, as long as m and n are co-prime to each other, right? Then you can just calculate sigma of very large numbers, right? So I'll just give you an example. So sigma of, for example, 16,072, right, is equal to sigma of 2 cube into 7 square into 41. Suppose this is the factorization, prime factorization. So because these three things are co-prime to each other, you can write it as sigma of 2 cube, sigma of 7 square, sigma of 41, right? Correct. And now
Yeah.
each of this one you can do by the formula. It is p power k, right? So it will be basically 2 power 4 minus 1 by 2 minus 1, right? Correct. And this will be 73 minus 1 by 7 minus 1, right? And this will be 41 2 minus 1, so 1. No, 1 second. What will this be? Sigma of 41. It is prime only, no? So it is simply 1 plus 41, right?
Yeah.
Right. This is also a result, right? Sigma of a prime number will be just 1 plus p, right? Correct? Because the two factors are only 1 and p. So you get the answer here. You get the answer here as 15 into, you get what? This will be 342 by 6. So it will be 47. No, not 47, 57 into 42, right? So you can get large values also if you know the properties of the sigma function, right? So we have seen 3 things. We have seen sigma of p power k is p power k plus 1 minus 1 by p minus 1. We have seen sigma of p is equal to 1 plus p. We have seen sigma of mn, as long as m and n are co-prime, will be equal to sigma of m into sigma of n, given m and n are co-prime. And we have not seen the proof of Euler's theorem, Euler's perfect number theorem, which is actually Euclid's theorem. Euclid had given a construction, Euler has given the proof. Okay, so this is on page 106 in the book. I want you guys to look through it before the next class, page 106 of this Silverman book. Okay, so we will discuss this and we'll do questions. So I also want to do questions for 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, so that is what we will do in the next class. We'll finish the proof of this and then we'll do questions from 12, 13, 14, 15 exercises. Because after this, some slightly more advanced applications will come. So we need to be thorough with whatever we have done so far. For example, 16th and 17th are quite important chapters for Olympiads, but it's also slightly more advanced. We need to know what we are doing right now already. Okay, that's all for now. But go through the book, see whether you are able to understand or not, and we'll see next time. Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you, sir.